All right, I think we should be ready soon. Um, yeah, let me add my camera. Uh, all right, cool. I think this should be working. I don't fully know. I want to have my PDP 11 in the picture. I guess I have to move for that. Um, all right, what are we gonna build? I'm gonna wait a little bit or like just talk. I don't know if someone's gonna join. We'll see. Um, Let me do some preliminary research, maybe. Uh, we'll see. I don't know if I can see the number of people in the room from OBS. Man, I wish I knew more about streaming. I wish I knew more about streaming. I have to do this more often. I move even further. All right, let's move even further. All right. This is kind of a mess over here. If I want to do this more regularly, I have to like do the whole streamer setup, I guess. Switching scenes, all the crazy stuff. Because I'm gonna draw on my iPad. All right, let me see if I can. There's like some Twitch tools in here. All right, it says one viewer. So who knows? There's a Twitch activity feed, whatever that is. All right, well, we'll get started. I wonder if you can hear me all right. That sounds good. And I guess I should first get into what I want to build today. So I've got this little board here, which I've had for like way too long without doing anything with it, which is a Raspberry Pi Pico 1, but with Wi-Fi. And I used to program it in Rust. Like I did a little bit with it, but in Rust, and I kind of don't like Rust. So I also I used to be a C++ embedded programmer, but I really don't feel like setting up C++ right now, which might be a mistake. We'll see. And instead, I'm going to try something which I never thought I would really try, but it's MicroPython. And I know nothing about MicroPython, so I guess we'll learn together. And I'm sure there's not much in the LLM for that. So I guess I'm already going too fast, but this stream is like mostly going to be about learning things more so than building something. But I'll also go into this into a more structured way of building things, and I can see that this is going to be some debugging pain potentially. I mean, maybe I'll work out of the box and I'll be like, why did I never use MicroPython before? But we'll see. And then yesterday I actually did a bunch of programming already using GPT real-time voice mode while doing the dishes, which was kind of crazy. So anyway, I think I'm gonna move back. Even that means my beautiful PDP 11 is not gonna be in the shot. I want to have it in the shot. So I'm gonna try something else out, which is sharing my iPad. And because I like thinking by drawing. So we're gonna try that out and see how it goes. how do I mute modifications? All right. So this should share my iPad. And I like drawing, so yeah, this seems to be working all right. The format, the size is a little bit weird, but so what we're gonna do is I kind of will make a plan. So what I have here is, this is my Raspberry Pi Pico 1W, and here's like a Pimoroni display, which also has, I think it has like 4 buttons. I don't even remember how you do a button schematic. All right. I haven't done embedded in like 5-6 years, so maybe I don't remember. I kind of don't remember anything. Both are connected. I don't know how they're connected. We'll see that. And then we'll use MicroPython to build. What I kind of want to build is, let me switch colors. What I want to build is a film test development timer. And what we did here already is starting to actually do some LLM coding, because it's all about having a very clear intent. I think that's when you get the most benefit from the AI, at least when you want to build something real, right? When you don't want to build something, well, or before you really know what you want to build, and actually this would be a good moment to switch to that. And in blue, I'm going to do these things that I'm going to write in blue about the actual workflow. So we're going to start from an idea, and then we have 2 paths. Is one, we already have a very clear spec, very clear idea. Or potentially, we don't have a very clear idea. And in this case, I don't fully have a clear idea. So we're going to work with prototypes first. Prototypes, especially Claude 3.7, for example, is really good at building like kick-ass prototypes, often a little bit too kick-ass. So what this allows us to do is iterate until we have a very clear idea. And this allows us to discover maybe things we didn't think about, maybe give us some ideas, maybe actually a working finished version that happens kind of fairly often as well. And that's one of the real advantages where LLMs come in, right? And I'm going to do this dash, dash, dash. This is like LLM stuff. This is where LLMs kick ass. So once we have a very clear idea, we kind of want to do a very clear spec. And again, writing a very clear spec, LLMs are very good at, because I consider LLMs, and this is a topic for another video, but basically I think of them as language transformers, right? So they take input language, so an input sequence of tokens, and I really think at this fundamental level, right? It's like they have a sequence of tokens, which are words, input, tokens. And then those go into a big fuzzy thing that we don't really understand and never will, in my opinion, because there's just no way that we will ever understand what it means to have a model of human language, especially if it's been reinforced in like certain different ways. There's just no way that we can comprehend that ever. We already have a hard time understanding like a learned model with like 4 parameters. So what about a model that has like billions of parameters? So we have these input tokens, and then these input tokens obviously get transformed to output tokens. So literally this thing, even the name of the architecture is like kind of kicked off the whole thing, transforms input tokens to output tokens. So you're like, well, that kind of sounds very, very obvious. Like, what the heck is this about? Well, one thing that it can do is it can recognize these patterns implied by certain words in the input. And then obviously the model has been trained on a tremendous amount of other tokens that similarly have like certain patterns that represent and connect them. Which means that this big machine here is able to take these 2 patterns, or like input patterns that it recognizes, and then things from the training corpus that it recognizes, and then kind of out of that build different output tokens that have relationships that hopefully make sense. And some of those tokens could be like the exact same from here, and then some of those tokens could be from here, and this is actually a bad way to represent it, right? Like, but they could also be like transformed new tokens. But the idea is, we don't have anything else other than the input tokens. And this is the case for every single inference we do, right? It's like, it doesn't have memory or so. It's like always the input tokens are the everything of a single inference. And so whatever you have in here is like obviously the only thing that matters. And if we look at this step here, this is like the transform. We have a very clear idea, which is expressed in some rambling words in my case, or maybe an image, which is also input tokens. And these input tokens infer some kind of structure, but these red dots make it like very confusing. There's like a lot of potential. Maybe I should do this with dots. There's like a lot of implied relationships that might not be good. There's like a lot of tokens that are just garbage. There's like a lot of stuff that is just unclear here, which makes it hard to work with because some of these patterns will confuse the LLM when it starts transforming things. And in the long run, this is just either too many tokens as well. Like the more tokens you have, the more you can have these like irrelevant relationships in there, as well as like irrelevant tokens. And especially if you have like tons of source code in there, you'll have like all kinds of for loops and while loops and variable declarations, all of those things you actually don't need to do a clear job. So this first transformation is basically going to give us a very cleaned up version of the spec, which by virtue of this being human language it's been trained on is actually very readable. And maybe I shouldn't draw it like this. Maybe I should draw it as a very clean structure. Something like this, right? We now have a very clear spec where it says, oh, like we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. And then maybe there's like a little bit of relationships in here. And this document here, in a way, is our application. If we assume that as agents grow, or like even already existing agents, plus things that input the right context work, then we don't need more than a very clear spec, and then we can just regenerate the app every time, and hopefully it like works. Okay, we're not there yet. Maybe we'll never get there. I'm actually now pretty sure we'll get there in a year for most applications we want to build that we know of today. I'm sure this will open the way for all the stuff we can build with a human in the loop is going to be wild. It already is wild. And once we have this very clear spec, right, we're going to start transforming this to actual code. So this is, I think, a workflow that now has become pretty standard. And it's in a way at the core of everything I do, but the fact that this is a spec is kind of secondary, because this transformation from a messy, right, like this messy set of tokens to a clear set of tokens is my actual abstraction. Is I always think about this transformation step and what these input tokens will imply in terms of structure, as well as, if we go back to an LLM itself, a knowledge of these structures in the training corpus. So let me put in names here. This is the training corpus. And this is where engineering knowledge comes in, right? Like the engineering knowledge, in a way, is knowing your patterns in here. So fundamentals of engineering is knowing patterns. And those could be like really complicated patterns, right? It could be like, do you know how distributed systems work? Do you know different design patterns, like the facade pattern or the strategy pattern or the repository pattern? Do you know Postgres, right? Because if I start writing a select here and I add the token Postgres, there's a whole set of relationships that are going to appear that are very different than if I were to do, say, like MySQL. So, right, like if I have, select from, which are all like little tokens, and then here we have a little symbol star, and then we have something like, I don't know here, but like pg dot threads. Doesn't exist, but I'm sure there's like a similar table. All kinds of relationships here, like the schema comes in, and then this here, and then these connect to training corpus patterns of Postgres already, right? It's not explicitly here, but obviously the pg dot something is like going to connect it to Postgres, and then the threads is going to connect it to Postgres threading model, and like there's all these like implied relationships that now come to play about threads and all kinds of things. And so now, if I add a new pattern, if I want to do my transformation, and I say like, oh, and then port this to MySQL, right? If I add these few tokens to the mix and send it to the LLM, right? Like I add this, then this is suddenly going to imply, if I take the PG threading plus the MySQL, for example, PG threading plus MySQL is kind of going to imply or have at least a link to, say, MySQL threads or processes or whatever it is, right? And then the structure is going to be transformed to a very similar structure at first, which is select star from. But it's going to insert this new token from like MySQL dot, I don't know, dot system dot threads. I don't remember the exact names. And this transformation here, right, like mapping this to here, transformation by LLM. I hope that makes sense. This like transformation step is, and I think this is, people have kind of called my prompting style like brutalist, because I'll show you what this looks like in practice now. So let's see how this looks, what this looks like in practice. If we go to, I don't know, Claude, and then I'm going to first just get the info, select number of active threads as SQL. And then you can already tell I just like, this is not how I would tell it to a human, right? But the tokens are here, SQL. This I could even leave out, which I'll show. And then select is important because I do want to have a SQL query. I already have SQL here, so I could leave it out. Let's leave it out. Let's do this, and let's see what happens. Right, so so one thing that it did here is that the threads table, does this work? Is this actually the way it works? Okay, no, but what's the system table for thread count? And this might be wrong, like Claude likes to hallucinate and I can't ground it with search, at least on the desktop part. So this is what I was looking for, right? So we're going to assume we're going to start a new thing where it has zero thing. And now we're just going to do this MySQL token as I was talking about, as I was drawing it on the iPad. And fingers crossed, because like demos with LLMs is, but there we go, right? So simply adding this token to the mix will transform this thing to the equivalent in MySQL, because it implies all these patterns, right? And obviously this thing has been reinforced on this kind of like instructions stuff, but like one token is usually enough. And what your value as an engineer is to know which of these tokens will have which effect. And as we know, that's not necessarily easy, right? And one of the big topics that I wanted to get into today is how do you learn these fundamental patterns? Because the LLM kind of allows us to forget that PG stat activity is where things are, but we can't skip the part that databases have usually a set of threads that we can select those from like kind of system tables, system views, and that there are two databases, Postgres and MySQL, that might work differently. So how do we learn the fundamentals behind this? Well, one very easy way is to literally just ask the LLM. And I would ground this with search, right? Here I'm fairly confident that the training corpus is like strong enough, but I would usually ground this in search, right? And as we can see here, it only does the PG stat activity. It doesn't do the MySQL. And it mostly focuses on like surface details, right? It doesn't fully give us the background here. But we already get a couple of interesting keywords, like connection pool saturation is something that I would like to learn more about. Long running queries is like also an interesting thing to maybe look into. And also, why do we want to use this? Like database administration and why we want even to query the active threads is also something we could learn about, right? So here, I could just continue basically asking a set of questions. And as you can see, this part is, again, the way I think about it is this is not an instruction to the LLM. The way I think it is, going back to the drawing I did before, is this is a set of token that will cause it, if I add them to this previous set of tokens, right? Because a model is autoregressive. sorry, this doesn't mean anything. Because we just concatenate the chat history when we send the new inference. Adding these tokens will cause the LLM to transform the implied patterns here. And actually, let me show the drawing again. If we have the query and its implied patterns from the training corpus, so this stuff here, we have this thing here, which implies threads, which implies threads. We have this pattern that implies threads from the training corpus. We also, it basically, these are all the hidden patterns that were connected to this table that we now surface through this transformation query, basically. Right? This is not per se an instruction to the model. It looks like an instruction because it has been reinforced to work with instruction-like language. But really, it's a set of token, and the fact that it's an imperative is actually just choosing the right tokens to do an efficient transformation. And the teach me, right, I could leave the teach me out and just do this, but there's a chance that it might do it like in a less educational manner. And I recommend experimenting with this, right? Like these minimal token things are really a good way to examine the effect of different things. So here you can see it surfaces things that are more interesting about database internal. That's not necessarily because we modified the query either, right? These things are not deterministic. So you want to roll the dice a couple of times when you want to, explore the LLM space, or if you're not happy with the result. And here it doesn't go onto database fundamentals as we had them before, right? It's like, if I go back to this one, we had these things here where we have server processes and shared memory and like statistics collector, which are much more, which is what I actually had in mind when I wanted to learn about this. There is, if you're a student and you don't know anything, right? This is the point where you have to know how to deal with the fact that it might or might not surface things you might or might not want to learn. But at this point, you can choose to have a different approach, which is, okay, what are the tokens? And this is my way of approaching it. It's like, I'm a student. I don't really know what I want to get out of this, or if the fundamentals that it surfaces are really the fundamentals that I want. And right, like I actually really don't care about the state column, but this is kind of interesting. But I don't know that because I'm a student that doesn't know anything. So assuming that well, this is where I want to start doing things. I don't have deep research, otherwise I would use it. I think Perplexity on my free plan, I still have one left. Yeah, I have one query left. So I could actually start using a model that has web search and potentially that has web search and more. Sorry, my words fail me. Oh, you see the iPad screen, sorry. So I'm back on the browser. I haven't actually input anything. I just opened Perplexity. So Perplexity is more complicated. It still has an LLM in there. So I want to put a query that will surface interesting things out of the web so that it's able to do... why do my words fail me? My robot's going on. Hold on. I want to stuff things into the Perplexity context, which will cause it to create good search queries, right? Research, database, fundamentals. And I assume that students want to know about database fundamentals and not fundamentals. Maybe that's implying too much. But however, so it can be a well-rounded system engineer, right? Like this is actually something that you can just attach as a token pattern that will cause deep research to create a good research plan, right? Like there's an LLM step here in deep research, which will cause a research plan. So actually, maybe I switch back to the iPad. I really need to get like one of those little widgets. So if we think what we have right now is like I have a shit ton of tokens that I just copy pasted from Claude that are implying different relationships here and are also already implying a lot of these like fundamentals from the, and actually there's like kind of like networks of fundamentals, right? Like for example, the word thread is something that like will be directly connected to fundamental knowledge that ultimately this fundamental knowledge is what will allow me to more quickly identify these connection patterns in the input, also know which keywords to use for transformation. They're basically ways to be more efficient with a machine, right? Plus they're also cool. And the more fundamentals you know, the more generic these patterns are, yet very effective. So if I start going to a database and I see that it's very slow, if I don't know what I'm doing, getting to something that's faster in a chat is going to be probably not very effective. It could actually be that it's very effective because if you say database slow, make fast, there's a lot of training corpus stuff that the agent might want to pull in, but it's kind of vague, right? Like it might pull in all kinds of different things. Some of them make sense, some of them don't. If you know that you want to have a connection pool or that you want to shard your database or whatever these fundamental patterns are, then you can do database slow, make fast, connection pool. And just adding those two tokens will completely change the effectiveness of the LLM, right? And that's where this fundamental knowledge that you currently actually really need a lot of coding and like butt and seat time to grasp. Now you can go straight to the chase and say like, you know, I want to learn this stuff, and I should have launched my research here in Perplexity. So what Perplexity is going to do, right, is like now I add the Perplexity query that I just input at the bottom. I send this to Perplexity. And then what Perplexity is going to do is like, it's going to do transformation steps to here create a research plan, right? And the research plan is similar to how we cleaned up a spec before. This is very similar to this process down here. It's like starting to get messy over here. But we're transforming, and we're basically solving a problem of, we have messy words from Claude, messy words from us, messy understanding of the problem. And we're now going to create a very clear spec, which is what Perplexity is doing for us. So this is a very clear learning spec in a way, which we did through this first transformation. And then this is where Perplexity Deep Research comes in. It's going to do a lot of transformations here into, based on its training corpus again, for like search queries to actually give to a traditional search engine. And then it's going to do all kinds of, so this is just going to be traditional web search, right? Traditional web. Going to give us a lot of tokens back from the results. And then it's going to combine this with this, all kinds of like reinforcement learning stuff. And it's going to do a big thing here until at the end, we have a very clear learning report, right? But at all times here, I just think about when we add tokens, this is not an instruction. It's a fetch pattern. It's a query. It's a transformation query. It's also a fetching things from the training corpus. It's like all of this at once. It's like transform plus query. And then at the end, we get something that is hopefully useful. It's like more tokens that allow us to fetch more things. And it also allows us to shape our own brains, right? like in a way, these words also transform our brains. Not that I want to draw too much of a comparison between LLMs and things. So this is what happens here, right? Is like these tokens we put in with the select and all of that, they're going to gear the search queries to look for exactly that database because it's very, very strong as a pull. But we already get like a ton of like more useful information. We get a ton of queries we can play with. And if we're, if we're like a interested student, a smart student, we might start to run with that and mess with that. But also we might realize, okay, this is actually the stuff that I should learn. These are very, very general terms, but it gives us like more specific terms, right? And so we might be able to say like, give me a list of topics I should research, learn about to become better at database internals. And those are generic learning queries. They're generic learning queries, they're generic learning patterns, which is, give me a list of things to look at. And then you just plug in the thing you want to learn about. So like a structured approach to learn things, right? And then suddenly from here, we can see, okay, this really goes into the stuff, right? And obviously, we're not going to learn all of this at once. So another learning query thing is that what should I start with? And it sounds like I'm just chatting to a human, right? Because that's what it's been trained to do. And in a way, that's also the way I think in some way. But kind of always in my mind is like, okay, well, no, this is actually like a search query, right? And a search and a transformation query. So it tells me to start with this, right? If I start regenerating things, you can kind of see. It doesn't update it. If I add a question mark, well, redo it. There we go. Depending on what you do, it might like surface different things. So I always recommend kind of regenerating when you don't really know what you're after. And then from there, you can go. So one query obviously is like, this is kind of similar to make me a curriculum or explain like I'm 5, like these kinds of queries. And here's another pattern that you can do is like, give me a set of beginner exercises to learn ACID. So again, give me a set of beginner exercises is just a fetch pattern to both fetch stuff and then transform things, right? Like if it has a fact and then from its training corpus, it knows what a beginner exercise looks like. And maybe it knows what is simple about atomicity. Maybe there's like articles that explain it like I'm 5. Like all of this stuff has now been put into the context window, right? Like the context window, remember, depending on how your application works, some of it might be summarized, but it's filled with all of these interesting things about I want to learn things, I want to learn the fundamentals, I want to learn databases, and originally I was interested in Postgres. So that's why it surfaces Postgres here, for example, right? And so it gives us like resources to learn about it, and then it gives us all of these kinds of things to actually have exercises. So this is a query where actually the model can also hallucinate, and it doesn't really matter all that much because now it's time for you to actually put the effort in to actually learn the stuff, right? Like you can't just passively consume things. That's why I really like the beginner exercises thing, because it gives you something to exercise your brain. The advantage is, A, they're like kind of customized to the stuff you were already putting in. And then B, if you get stuck, you can actually ask the LLM for a little bit of help. The one thing I really recommend people is like when you do these things, turn autocomplete on. It's the iPad. Damn, I really need to get at this. So the whole time I was doing deep research, Jesus Christ. So I put in my original Claude thing here, plus the query, research fundamentals behind this, so I can be a well-rounded senior engineer. So this is kind of a set, right? Like I can put this into everything, everything technical. I can use this pattern. And in fact, we can try that in another window. once I get the results here, you can see how the input tokens really, really strongly influence the output. And then because there's so much about PG stat activity in there, it's actually going to focus mostly on the Postgres side of things, right? Like the search queries that Perplexity generated, plus the research plan. If we do look at this thing here, it's like it's going to say, oh, I will research the plan to gather information about the fundamentals of Postgres PG stat activity, which is, it's a decent starting point, right? If it's a keyword we snatched up from somewhere. And so I will often do these things where I'm like, this sounds interesting. Like, what is it? What is this keyword? What is this pattern? What is this function? What is this API? Like all of these things I'll just put in there and say like, oh, give me the fundamentals behind this. Like explain this to me. And so since I actually want to, build a MicroPython application, I don't have deep research, but we're just going to do this with traditional search, and then I don't think we would need a reasoning model. I'm going to burn some GPU though. Going back to our concept, this is a search retrieval query. I want a topic for what I want to retrieve. I really don't need to put much in here because I'm really legit just interested in MicroPython, right? So this is a way I can start, and then I don't fully know which search queries it's doing, which would be really interesting because I'm not sure how much of this will be transformed to a legit query. But it's already going to be a really good subset, right? 256K of code space, that's really interesting. 16K of RAM also. Oh man, that's dope, actually. I think MicroPython might be a tool I take up. GPT-4.5 is slow as fuck. All right, give me 5 minutes. All right, 2 minutes. I'm gonna grab something to drink while this is generating. By the way, if you have any questions, like feel free to ask them. So it's been doing research on MicroPython. We'll come back to this. But let's go back to the research here. This is pretty great. And I found this really, really cool to look at the reasoning stuff. And the Perplexity one is really nice. The OpenAI one is a little bit weird, I found. So I really like reading the output of OpenAI Deep Research. This is much more concise, but I found the amount of information in Perplexity's Deep Research and the way it's structured to be pretty good too. So I might have to revive my subscription. So what I did here, right, we get our first deep research result, which has a ton of stuff about, as you can see, like some pretty fine-grained details about PG stat and all of that, which, you know, it might be cool. It's like nice to play with them and like experiment with them, which is maybe what I would like to do if I were to want to learn about this. But we can see the last pattern here is actually the more interesting one, which is this. And I think as a student that doesn't know anything, I'll be able to pick up on the fact that this is the actual the real shit. So this is where my query patterns come in, which is give me a list of topics I should research, learn about blah, blah, blah to become better. This again is like a generic learning queries, right? Like these, actually, why don't we put all of these learning queries in a document so I can reuse them verbatim in my MicroPython learning adventure. And I mean, they're simple enough that you can just, you can just come back to them. Oh, you can see my LLM course structure because I do want to write a course. So learning prompts. The first one we have is this one. This was the second one. The first one was this was the first one. Right, so there's this. There's give me a list of topics. There's research fundamentals. They're kind of similar in a way. Then we get a whole list of actually underlying database internals, right? Because I asked the database internals, even though it knows it has still the Postgres and pgstat and stuff like that. The cool thing about web search is I get actual sources. I get some Udemy courses, which whatever. And I found that I haven't played too much with Perplexity Deep Research, but OpenAI's Deep Research is really, really steerable. So if you say like, oh, please use like high quality academic sources, they will like stop using YouTube and stuff like that. I don't know how good Deep Research is. I really like Kagi's search index. So Kagi has something like that as well, which is if I reuse my exact prompt that I had here, research fundamentals behind database internals instead of this. I really like the search index of Kagi. This assistant works okay. I that's why I canceled my Perplexity. I was like, let's use what I have with Kagi. So, and I'm not sure what it's giving me. This is like weird shit. But again, like if I'm a student, I don't think this would be, at this point, I don't think it'd be too hard, especially if you're used to learning with data, with LLMs to realize, okay, well, yeah, now this is, I need to be a little bit more discriminatory. If it like starts putting numbers in there, maybe this is not the full fundamentals. And then I find this book and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. This book, maybe I should buy it and read it. Because books are still great, right? You do have, I mean, learning just needs effort on your part. But it doesn't need to be frustrating effort. It doesn't need to be wasted effort as well. So this is the pattern. We get a list of a shit ton of topics, which is a little bit overwhelming, right? Like I don't know what to start. So at this point, the search query is going to be, what should I start with? And this is where, am I speaking to something? Am I just putting in search queries? It's kind of blurry in my brain. It's very easy to just, I mean, it's also a good strategy to just talk to it as if you were talking to a research assistant, because that's how it's been built and that's how it's been reinforced. And that's the kind of language that it uses for queries. So, it's good to turn off your brain and think of it like, oh, this is my research minion, or this is my coding minion that understands sentences instead of just using them as token query patterns. And then this is the one where really things are starting to switch, which is, there's a pattern I don't see a lot of people use, where you're like, they hallucinate, they do X, Y, Z. Well, here, the hallucinations are really kept in check because I do have real resources to look at. Right? Like I can go into like YouTube videos. I can like say, maybe I want like high quality YouTube videos. I can apply my media literacy to filter that stuff out the same way we filter stuff out on Stack Overflow or just Google searches. And then this gives me a set of exercises that maybe are like, they're not like super here. So a thing you can do, which I like doing, is make web app to learn about 40 for these two exercises. Like Sonnet 3.7 is so freaking eager that you really have to rein it in. If I were to give it like all of these, it will just like write like millions of tokens and run out of tokens, and it like takes forever. So I'm just gonna do this. That's all, not more. Again, think of those as queries that imply that the transformation is going to be shorter. It looks like natural language, but to me, it's like more like what you put into a Google search field, you know? And but here I also thought about a human, right? Like this is not the most efficient way of probably encoding this pattern. I haven't found out what the best pattern is to cause it to not do this like gazillion million CSS nonsense. Well, actually, I found you can say like use Bootstrap CSS. Actually, let me show that how these kinds of little patterns and fundamental knowledge of like Jesus Christ really make a difference. Because if I put this in, obviously these two tokens are going to fetch the whole set of patterns in the training corpus about Bootstrap CSS. And then the set of tokens is much shorter, right? So those are things you pick up. It's like, I don't know Bootstrap CSS anymore, but I need to know what Bootstrap CSS is. And actually, depending on what I build, I need to really know how it works or like what it enables, because this is prone to hallucinations, right? Like there's a ton of CSS everywhere. There's probably a ton of like CSS frameworks that use MB.0, or maybe not, but like H5. So it's like, these are all tokens that are prone to being hallucinated just because they're used across pretty much every CSS framework out there. And then maybe you should know that like, oh, Bootstrap doesn't have cards, right? And if you know that, then obviously you're going to be much faster. If you don't know it, then, well, you have to learn it. Like, I mean, that's how it is right now as well. It's like you can write shitty code and realize that it doesn't work. But now you get these like little web UIs, and it's not even necessarily that you as a student should write these, but you should. Like if they don't work, you'll learn something, like you'll have some productive friction. The danger is, of course, that they teach you something bad. However, as a teacher, as a mentor, as someone who wants to explain someone something, you can make sure that this works. And right, like this is such a standard pattern that I'm pretty sure it works. But this is pretty great, right? Like I mean, maybe this is not the best way of showing it or something, but this is interactive, so it's like kind of fun to play with. You can, and then suddenly you can make like a whole set of exercises around it. Like this is what I've been using kind of for, I've been mentoring students in basically full stack development this whole year, and I this whole 2024, and I've just generated a ton of exercises transforming their code. You can make the exercises about their code base. You can make the exercise about what they don't necessarily understand. You can do all kinds of little things. And right, and show them like different ways of approaching it. And if I'm like, oh yeah, this app, you know, compared to the previous one, doesn't really show things, I can start modifying it, like show SQL. And I can start molding this application to the things I actually want to teach. And like, of course, I need to be a good teacher to know like, oh, what's going to work for my students, right? And so here you can say show a SQL, obviously caused it to show the SQL because that's probably the strongest pattern in there. I'm sure if I regenerate often enough, it will like show it in the app. But at this point, you can see I'm not going to try to correct it. I just like stop it and then modify my prompt, which is something I fundamentally do in my application programming as well, which is, oh, that means like my search query was not good. So instead of like adding more search queries on top of it, which, you know, if you start debugging, going into a debug loop with the LLM, what you're doing is just like, you're adding not only what you type, but like all the output of the LLM is going to be a search query, and it's like nonsense. So why add all this nonsense to your search query to hopelessly try to find something, and then more and more it starts to fetch like maybe patterns that are completely nonsensical. I mean, sometimes the real pattern is like right there in the error stack or whatever. But often it's just easier to go back, add 2 tokens to your query, and suddenly make it work and have success, right? So this was a pretty nice tangent, a 1-hour tangent. We haven't gotten into MicroPython yet, but we're going to use all of this for MicroPython, right? And that's pretty nice, right? Like now we really start to learn something, and so now I could be, oh, students, like write the SQL, and then when you're ready, do this, which I don't necessarily trust students to do, but if they're serious about it, or like I'm sure we can do it in class. I can add like, oh, please write this thing out to make it work, right? Like I can give them broken exercise and they have to make it fix, but like all of this is really way more fun than just reading a book about transactions, right? And this is so cheap to do now. Like there's no way that on a stream chatting, yapping all the time, I would have gotten there, obviously. So I think in terms of learning and in terms of like, young programmers learning the right stuff, I think that's on us currently who are senior people to really start to leverage these things. But then also, can you do that stopping generation in Cursor? Yeah, you can. I think it's Control Backspace. Oh no, it's not Discord. Discord is not Cursor. It feels like Discord. But I'm just chatting with myself. So let me see. Close all. Close all. So I still have the old version of Cursor because I don't think they released a new one for Mac. I think they like changed the UI framework or something. Sorry, all downloads. And I think they have the new Linux one. Oh, cool. Cool. It's going to break everything, but YOLO. I wrote myself a little shell script to do that though. Fetch the latest version. And then it installs all the Linux nonsense. So install it. And YOLO. All right, let me restart this. Was this a big mistake? I don't think so. Oh, this is still the old version. Right? 050. What is going on? Where did it download? Oh, it downloaded the 0415. Okay, so it didn't install the new one. So how does this all work? I don't remember how this shell script works. Well, this is where it gets fun, right? It's like I can go in there and then say, how does this work? I have a standalone app image that I want to install. Context. All right. So it does that. Downloads the latest version to download the app image. If you're, I have a manual app image. All right, I hope that this works and it's not hallucinated. So downloads. I guess I need to do this. Copy. Is it lowercase c or uppercase c? Lowercase, uppercase. Cursor. Wait, it has two. I guess we'll take the latest one, huh? Local apps. And then, yeah, cool. Local apps. And then I wonder why it wasn't able to download the last one. I think they just like struggle with their auto updates infrastructure, and I don't blame them. That stuff is really fucking annoying to set up. All right, so but it uses the wrong one. Maybe it's because of the lowercase c. I wonder if it's because of the lowercase c. Can it handle cursor versus cursor? Yeah, that's what I thought. And so I really need to add like edit file as a tool. So where's the pattern? All right, so and that was it, huh? All right, let's try again. Now it installed the right one. All right, cool. Let's try it. This is how I used to develop in the before cursor times. It was not that fun. All right, so now we have this chat thing. I'm not sure I like it actually, so, you know. And then you can switch down here. What is edit? Anyway, make a tutorial about PG stat activity. And then you can just control backspace to stop it, right? Like this thing here, or you can also click on it. That's quite nice. And then you can either edit the previous one or you can like continue down here and leave this in the context window. What is this? I really wish you could edit this stuff here, right? So you could like do a long conversation where you fix something and then rewind and just say like apply the fix to the first message and let me continue from there. I really hope that they add that because there's no reason that it has to be this like me, you, me, you, me, you structure. It's like me and then tokens, me, tokens, me, tokens. And when I resubmit, basically the tokens of the LLM become kind of my query tokens, and I wish I could edit those. So this was learning, making exercises. Those are some pretty good patterns, right? It's like, give me a set of beginner exercises. You can also, another learning pattern that's pretty good, and let me use something like this here, is like, ask me questions so I can learn about this Socratic style, for example. So that's a pretty common one. I don't know if Socratic is like all that great, but some people like it. So I said questions, obviously, which at this point it will just like generate many questions. So if I add as a dialogue, it's going to be like more of a dialogue. Again, it's just like a query, a matter of like putting tokens in to make a query. And then here, it like said, okay, well, it's a dialogue. Ask me question as a dialogue, right? So maybe interactive is going to be good. This was weird. I would have thought that it would. Oh, Jesus Christ. I was hoping to avoid putting this in, but I guess I haven't played too much with 4 or 5 also, so maybe it's like less interactive and more like writing. Well, it shouldn't debit from mine, right? And so this is really cool to learn if you like dialogues. And I've started using voice mode, real-time voice mode, and that's actually really cool. It's pretty slow. I don't like voice all that much, but I was doing the dishes yesterday, and that was really cool. Like this is what I was doing when I was doing the dishes yesterday. I was starting to build the application that I actually wanted to build today. You can use the web search, and I was asking all kinds of questions. Right? It was like, oh, I want to build like a little clock, and then it says, then it answered using voice, right? And this was all pretty cool because I was just like chatting while doing the dishes, and I can imagine that for learning, there's something about speaking things out and like iterating on them that is pretty cool. And so what is nice in terms of prompts, so we had like the Socratic dialogue, right? Make exercises is one. Socratic dialogue is cool. And what's really fun, right? Like there's this saying, the best way to learn something is to teach it. So why not? Why not do that? I want to learn about this to become a ninja senior systems engineer. This also primes it, right? Like it primes it into a certain direction. I chose ninja with that in mind as well. They say the best way to learn something is to teach it. I'm putting that in there just because I'm curious to see what will happen. I won't be able to tell probably what happens, but why not? So I want to play the role of a teacher and you of a student. However, correct me when I'm wrong, but you should also challenge me with your questions, answers. Start by asking me a question. So this is a way to add friction, right? Like add interaction, add play to your learning, make you do something that will make things stick. And this is kind of the value of being at a university, right? It's like, of course, you can look at all the material online these days. You can do all the exercises, like there's all these things, there's forums, you can talk to people, but the real value is like being able to sit down with 4 people who really are trying to learn the same thing as you at the same time, so are invested, and then talking back and forth, and like they don't know much about the topic either, right? But it's like very valuable learning experiences. And here it's kind of similar. Right? So if we let multiple transactions update data at the same time to make the system faster, then we can run into race conditions where data gets corrupted and into an invalid state. For example, if 2 debits are done at the same time. So you can do this, and then, at some point, there's things that I might not know. Okay, hold on. I don't know this. Do you have some resources I could read? And then I turn on search, for example. Right? And then this allows me to actually get real stuff and actually do the work. So you can do this back and forth between be a student, be actually a search engine, like be something that takes notes. So that one is pretty cool as well, right? It's like learning by teaching. There's another one that I have to play more with because I'm not a flashcard aficionado too much, and creating good flashcards is kind of hard. So I'm thinking about, instead of asking the model to create flashcards, to have an agent that makes me create good flashcards, because that's kind of easier. So I haven't played with that too much yet. I want to learn Vietnamese this year, so maybe I'll put in more stuff. But so make a set of 5 flashcards about concurrency control. Make them effective, like Matushak describes. I hope that this fetches stuff nicely. We'll see. But I think creating an agent for this that makes me create the flashcards is going to be much more useful. And in fact, these like more complicated things, right? We can actually also use ChatGPT to create them, and 4.5 is just like way too fast, way too slow, sorry. Create a system prompt for an agent that helps me design effective flashcards using Matushak's techniques. Look them up, summarize them, then write the system prompt. Here I'm using a technique that people call like chain of thought, right? Like I ask it to do something, then to kind of think out loud, because LLMs need to output tokens to do thinking, right? It's like each token has a certain amount of compute. You want to have the LLM compute something decent. If you ask it to answer outright, it potentially doesn't have enough compute invested to do the thing. So people call it chain of thought, tree of thought, like all kinds of things. I just call it like make the LLM output tokens that make it output better tokens, kind of, right? So it's building up a set of the tokens are going to be in the context window are going to be much, 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 much stronger than the stuff that's in the training corpus. So I want to have it surface stuff from the training corpus in a way that will make its response all that much stronger. But they also give me a way to verify that it's going into the right direction. I can stop it early, right? Like if I realize that whatever description of my code it's coming up with, for example, is wrong, then I can just stop it and say like, yeah, don't go further. And so in a way, when you store a document or a prompt and you want to reuse it in the future, say a reference document, what you're doing is like kind of caching the retrieval of useful patterns from the training corpus. That's kind of how I think of it. They're just like cached queries, cached like context stuff. So, because it now has a set of key principles, the system prompt that it's going to create is going to be this. I don't think this is a super great agent prompt, but this. So Claude's Anthropic's console is actually pretty good at making prompts better, at least for Anthropic. So let's just try it. Improve an existing prompt. There we go. This prompt will have this. Templatize. This is a pretty cool agent to help improve prompts. Like I found that it works pretty well and it's really useful. So detected variables, it's like no. Let's add this. Create flashcards. No, help me create. Play the role of a Socratic dialogue person to help me create flashcards about. I create the flashcards. You guide me. And I'm pretty crass with my language here. Crass language always has like the thing that it might entail it fetching like some colloquial way of speaking, which can be annoying. But I know it's going to improve the prompt, so I actually don't care all that much. And then this is kind of an agent that does, this is basically chain of thought again. It's like generating tokens to make it generate better tokens. And it's doing that by interleaving different additional tokens in there to do this like step by step with some feedback. And so this is pretty good, right? It's a pretty good improvement on the prompt where it says like, oh, it should be an agent, should be having things like this. So gonna roll with it. And the workbench is pretty nice. Right. So model settings, thinking. New version available from manual Odendahl. All right, cool. Turn this on. And then I can make a new one. I can do flashcard about database, internals, ACID, isolation. So now it's doing its thinking. It's doing all this stuff from the new prompt. And hopefully it will help me create good flashcards. So I haven't really experimented with that. The thing is like, right, like here, it's already like creating flashcards for me, which it shouldn't do. It should like guide me through it. So is this still doing its thinking? Yeah, so it might. Yeah, so this is actually the thing that's interesting. So this looks like a really promising agent, actually. So cool. I'm going to use this prompt, right? Gonna go back to ChatGPT, and then it has a topic variable here. I'm gonna do topic is equal to ACID isolation and database internals. I don't think I need that, but why not? And right, like this is not a programming language. It's not an assignment. It's not anything. It's like a pattern. It's tokens that will match this token over there and like kind of make it all do this. And so if I turn on, you know, thinking, and we try this, then maybe we'll get a little bit more thinking. Yeah, this thinking was really not long. So I don't know how to prompt thinking models all that much. Think very hard before your first answer. I don't know if that stuff works. I know it works with Anthropic-ish. Yeah, it seems to work. No, it doesn't. You don't even see all that stuff. So, all right. I don't know what a good flashcard is, to be honest. Let me just paste one from here. Anyway, you get the idea. The idea is like I have to do work in my head to actually learn something, but the LLM makes it fun, makes it like guided, helps me like create really good flashcards, and then and I can always revert to like, you know, oh, please don't play games with me, just help me out. And of course, you can do this super cool stuff of like output as Anki format, for example, right? You can just I mean, this is kind of stupid, but you can just download it, and if you are able to put in like MCP tools, for example, you could just like MCP tool it into Anki, and actually that's a good idea. So what I do when I have ideas like that of stuff that I would like. So the thing I do when I have ideas like that I want to build is I have a sketchbook and I just put them in as like ideas. It sounds stupid, and it's actually kind of a hard habit to get into, but it's surprisingly cool because now I can literally take a photo of my ideas page and just say like build it. So I wrote down here just I have this little convention of just putting idea tags around it. All right, I knew I would go on like superb tangents and not actually work on what I want to work on, and then I get tired. So let's see. I want to build a timer application with MicroPython using this like Pymoroni display, but I don't know much about MicroPython, so I actually used my learning prompts to do this. Here, what I want to do is like a tutorial to set things up on Linux plus VS Code plus Raspberry Pi Pico W. And this is where I would use deep research, to be honest. But I'm curious to see what will come up. My deep research request will refresh tomorrow. But we'll follow this, see how far we get. I might just like revive my Perplexity subscription. All right, so install the MicroPython extension. Let's do that. MicroPyco. I mean, this looks like exactly what I want. Sure, man. Oh, I already have it. All right, cool. This looks like something I should download. Let's close all of this junk. Close, close, close. There we go. Install the MicroPyco extension. Oh yeah, okay. So that's what we just installed. Flash MicroPyco firmware MicroPython to Raspberry Pico W. So I just downloaded the firmware. Connect your Pico W using a USB cable. So I don't freaking know why they didn't put a boot cell switch on their freaking board. And maybe I should. I wonder if I could shortcut this by just shorting it manually. Let's try that. Can I just, because I don't want to unplug, replug that cable all the freaking time. So where's VBus? Am I going to do just, so did it come back up as a, yeah, as a boot. All right, well, I'm gonna solder that later on because like shorting it, I just like literally shorted it with another USB cable. It's a good hardware fun. So we are in bootloader mode. A new mass storage device named RPRPY2 has appeared. No, it hasn't. Does it have one? Oh yeah, it has. Mount dev SDA1. Must be super user to mount. All right, cool. Drag and drop the downloaded file here. Oh, there we go. Jesus golly. All right. And then I guess when I unmount it, it's going to start flashing. Is it? Okay, that's missing. Let's see. Reboot our Pico after dropping UF2 after unmount. So I hope that that's in the training corpus, right? Because LLM Unix, which is just a front end for my Pinocchio tool, doesn't have search yet. You don't need to manually reboot it. Will automatically restart once the transfer is complete. So did it reboot now? Oh, it's in FS mode. File system mode. What did it do? So it registered as a USB-C. So I think it worked actually, huh? Create a new folder for your project and open it in VS Code. So that's what we're going to do. Open folder. We're going to go into Google Labs. I'm going to make a new folder. There we go. Embedded plus MicroPython. All right. So select it, a new mass storage, blah, blah, blah. Open MicroPyco configure project. MicroPyco configure. No, so this is, oh, did it have it? Initialize. This is where it starts. It's weird. Jesus, it worked. That's wild. So really nice tutorial. So it's actually so nice that I'm gonna put it into my thing. So the way I approach these kind of like intermediate LLM artifacts is that I create folders that have the date and that are in ttemps. This is kind of to tell them I'm not gonna keep updating them. Linux.markdown. And then there was one thing that was missing in here, right? Which is the device will reboot, unmount the drive. Why does it have these little question marks at the end? That's fun. It's probably the link reference. Create a new folder, and then we're gonna do the hello world, the hello world of embedded, which is great. So we're gonna make a tests folder. Then we're gonna make a file. No. We're gonna make a file led.py. I'm gonna name it 1. And how do I execute it? To run the script, Control P, run current file on Pico. Run current file on Pico. Oh, look at that. So this is 80% of getting a successful embedded project is like getting the thing to work here. So my suspicion is that if we start using Cursor to write the firmware, then we might be in for a bad time because it will, it's Python, but it's actually not. 2, it probably doesn't really know what the Raspberry Pi Pico API is and which devices and stuff like that. So there's probably a good chance of hallucinations, but maybe not. Things have gotten crazy lately. So I'm going to do, at this point, if I go back to my iPad and I go to there's some weird spam in the chat, whatever. I don't know how Twitch works. Let me go back to my iPad and we can actually go back to the project. So on the iPad, what we're doing at the very beginning, right before I started going off on a tangent, is in the Vibes coding workflow, starting from an idea, then we want to formulate this kind of idea or do prototypes until we know what we're going for. And then once we have a clear idea of what we want to build, it doesn't need to be formulated out cleanly. Then we create a clear spec, right? And then from the spec, we create code. And as things get better, obviously, obviously the spec becomes more and more and more important. So I'm going to start with prototypes. I already know pretty well, and let me turn the iPad off. I already know pretty well what I want to build, but let me go through the whole workflow. And I like artifacts, which are kind of slow, but you know, they're kind of slow, but they're fun. Create a prototype UI for an embedded RPico plus Pimoroni RGB display plus 4 buttons application that allows me to time the development time when doing film strip tests with different chemicals. I want to record the experiment number the developer used, some well, actually, I want to record the developer used from a preset list, the time until developed, and then developer affixer used, and then the time until fixed. Also, yeah, let's do that. So here, I kind of want the functionality, but I didn't describe the UI, right? And usually I'm not really great at stuff, so it already starts doing stuff here. So I'm just gonna, for fun, I'm just gonna copy paste it and then see what happens. And if it works, I'm just like gonna go for a walk and just be like, what am I doing as a developer? It does have A, B, C, D buttons. This is starting to be scary. Actually has A, B, X, Y buttons, but I don't think this will work, but like, who freaking knows? So, Claude prototype 1.py, and then Pico graphics. So this is interesting. How do I install on my, what's the MicroPico VS Code extension? This doesn't even have web search, so I'm kind of built-in package manager. So connect your Pico and open Thonny IDE. So this is where it's starting to kind of hallucinate, I think. I'm not sure. I don't know what Thonny IDE is. Install libraries. And Claude really likes to hallucinate in some way. Even more than the 3.5 one. Run the file. Click the run button in MicroPico. No module name MIP. So I don't like this. We're starting to get into hallucination, and I was actually expecting it to do a React prototype, but with search, download Pimoroni's MicroPython firmware. What about upip MPI? MIP? Do I really need the Pimoroni firmware. Yeah, I think I'm going to go to the custom firmware. Yeah, because this import MIP doesn't work, huh? And the network connected, I could do that, but this is all advanced shit. I'm gonna do this. So none of the builds, if you've got a shiny new support. All right. Change this since beta 1. This is pretty cool. All right, doesn't work on the RP2040. Inky, blooby, blooby. And so, Jesus Christ, which one should I use? Let's go. Which one? What are these? Cosmic Unicorn, Envirus Series, Galactic Unicorn. That's not what I have. What do I have? Pico Lipo, customize for this. PPP, USB host, Stellar Unicorn. So I guess I'm going to use this one, Pico W. All right, let's go. So we already know how to install it. Let me reboot my Pico with some hard-ass shortcut. All right. Sudo mount this. It does not exist. Did I burn it? Can't look up block dev. Oh, maybe I thrashed it. Let's see. It'd be stupid if I like burnt my Pico. It doesn't reappear. That's not a good sign. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. That'd be fun. All right, here we go. Oh no, it's still not there. Did I thrash it? How clever of me. USB disconnect. Oh well. Maybe shouldn't have done that. There's one chance is that I just disabled the USB port. Yeah, that seems like that's what it was. All right, there we are. So I guess shorting the USB port, not the best idea. Maybe I should short just, well, no, it's powered through VBus, so. Or is it powered through VBus? I could short the 3 volt. Let me try that. Did that work? Yeah, that works. So that's cool. I'll short the 3 volt one, which shouldn't influence the USB power. All right, so what was the thing is that on downloads, we now have the Pico W firmware, which we put in here. And then we unmount it. It will reboot and flash. So I think now it's flashing. Cool. So we're going to update this by Command A, going to our tutorial, right? And then we're going to go like update this to be installing the Pimoroni Pico W firmware. So I just like literally just copy pasted Command A because why not? because these documents are important, right? Like those are actually meant for human consumption mostly, and it's nice when they work. Really good to onboard new people. Really good to onboard myself tomorrow. Because they're like on point, right? And I'm going to show you how to remove the LLM slop. Although this LLM slop is pretty good. So what did it change here? All right, why not? Oh, it just removes these little guys over there. Excuse me. All right, flash this. So that's cool. That's all correct. Drop, unmount. Cool, and it has like a new hello world. So let's try out this hello world, right? Now that we have the new firmware. So let's create a new one here. New file 04. No, Pimoroni tutorial. And so how do I have MicroPyco pick up on the new Python libraries and firmware? Configure project. Verify. Does it have package? Focus on packages view. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, whatever. I'm pretty sure this was the right password. All what's the password? For Yolobolo. Yeah, Brink 3248 camera. Anyway. All right, this is something else. Who knows? It said experimental, huh? Who knows? So that wasn't what we wanted. And then here, how do I find out which Python MicroPyco is using? At this point, I should maybe use the MicroPyco webpage. Switch Pyco. I wonder how to make this work here. All right, so now we're out of LLM mode, right? Here we just like standard stuff. execute on connect, no soft reset on run. All of those are not really useful. So MicroPyco. Auto-completion, MicroPyco firmware, getting started, initialize MicroPyco, import stubs for autocomplete. Descunch to install recommended things. MicroPyco. All right, let's try this. Initialize MicroPyco project. No, I don't want that. Configuration completed. So it's still not doing this. Let's do a traditional web search. Import MicroPyco. MicroPython modules. MicroPyco VS Code. And then I'm just gonna so this looks good. MicroPython stubs. There's also this. So this is cool. So I'm just going to update the tutorial, right, to install MicroPython, and it's like update to install the Pymoroni stubs. And so I could paste the content of the web page, but maybe I'll just copy paste the link to see what happens. Yeah, all right. So really, I'm focusing on making a kick-ass install tutorial because that will come in useful all the time, right? Like I had to switch to manual stuff because the AI doesn't really know what I'm after, I think. Or, I mean, maybe it's able to figure the stuff out by now, but I don't think so. So I'm helping it a little bit along. I also, as the ChatGPT here was starting to go a little bit nowhere, I kind of switched to manual search just because I guess, you know, so how do I install Pymoroni stubs? That it's going to be interesting, right? I search the web, so maybe I'll figure it out. Here's how to set them up. For Windows, Py install. So that's interesting. That's interesting. So maybe that's actually better than what we did, huh? I don't trust it, but you know, maybe. I mean, it worked. All right, so actually this was better. So we're going to take this and then we're going to go back here. We're going to install and update this because, right, like I'm not going to correct it down here because all of this stuff is just additional tokens that are not conducive to a proper query or transformation query. There is, actually did it? I didn't even read what it did because it says it proposed to install those with pip. Oh, so I already had it. So cool. Actually, let me accept that. Accept all, and we're done. And then this is where it starts to get interesting, right? Where it's like, oh, is this hallucinated? Is this something else? And I don't know what my Pico display is called. It does have I think it's I2C OLED. No, I don't know what display it is. This thing. It's called Pico display. That's all it says on it. It's definitely not a square display. So let's look this up. And Pico display pack. What is that? So this is the one I have. 240 times 135. Does it have 135? No, it doesn't. RGB, blah, 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 blah. Getting started. MicroPython function reference. Pico reference. So this is pretty cool. Can I paste images in here? Into my tutorial? No, I can't. Is there an extension to do this? VS Code extension to copy paste images into Markdown. Micrographics, Picographics function reference. Supported displays. So Pico display, it's the standard one here, right? So at this point, I am curious to see if we can just, so one way to do this in Cursor, oh shit. Oh, I need to make a history browser. Let me write that down as an idea. And then based on how much stamina I have, and I think explaining things less will make me able to go a little bit faster. We might just want to build this history explorer for Pinocchio, because currently this is a bit rough. This was the conversation I just closed by mistake. And for copying, pasting images into, how do I convert this to YAML? All right, there we go. Oh, it doesn't format it nicely. So anyway, install the paste image extension. All right, well, I could have figured that out, huh? Paste image. All right, cool. So if I start adding, I'm going to create a new file. 02 Pico reference. So I'm going to paste all the reference stuff kind of in there. So if I paste the image, yeah, this didn't really work, huh? Great. Do I need to set this up? Oh, they have an MCP tab. All right. Anyway, let's not get too distracted. Oh gosh, why does it not copy paste the image? Anyway, so we have this here. So one way to add this as a context in Cursor is to add this as docs and then do add new doc and put this in here. So now I have a Pico graphics. I'm like kind of not sure of how well it indexes it because it says like index 0 pages, index 0 pages, OpenSearch index 0 pages, which is like, okay, what? Give me the rundown of the docs. Jesus. Yeah, I kind of don't trust this. Never did actually. And so one way to do this, which is my preferred way actually, instead of copy pasting stuff from the website, what I do is I have a code others and then I just like git clone this, right? And it's useful to have this in here. So what did it read here? Oh, it found the typings. So I found the typings, which is already kind of like a useful thing. That I'm annoyed at, like what the heck. So, however, I'm gonna do add folder to workspace. I'm gonna choose the thing we just cloned, right? And then what you can do in here is create a great documentation focusing on Pico W, RP2040, and Pico display 120. No, what is the resolution of the Pico display? 240 times 130. 5. So extensive, detailed, short code snippets, all the graphics and button functionality for a reference for developers working with the boards. This is kind of crappy prompt engineering, but I really should get better at this. I am going to try with 3.5 and then I'm going to try with 3.7 because I'm like kind of curious what the differences are. Code base, not indexing. So there we go. This is kind of how I approach it. In a way, this is like the documents as cached reasoning thing that I was talking about, right? Like I could put the whole code base in there, let the agent figure out stuff, put tokens in the context window, and then hope for the best. And we do this on every prompt, like hope for the best. Or I can create a clean document that's like a pleasure to read as a solo developer as well when I want to do things the same way. This tutorial was kind of really nice to get started, right? And especially now the tutorial is like actually really tailored to my situation, right? Which is this board and then this display as well. So I'm going to do the same here. Is like I'm going to do the Pico graphics reference. And I could do the Python reference, right? Like I would hope that the document download indexing agent by Cursor would do a better job. And this would be a good job for a document creating agent, which maybe I'll write down as well. The reason why I'm not creating all these agents, and I really should, is that I really want to do it with my own Go framework that's like kind of lagging behind at this point. Doesn't really have nice things to create agents. I really should. And I had this idea like 2 years back when context windows were really, really small of how to create agents declaratively. Kind of didn't pan out. I mean, it's still there. I still really want to do it, but I kind of got too over-engineered maybe. Like playing with patterns that like require more than I was going too far without really knowing what I wanted. So I'm actually curious if 3.7 can deal with that, right? So this is great. In these documents, usually there's a bunch of LLM slop, which doesn't seem to be the case here. So, because these are actually useful best practices, and I think it'll just like took that from the referenced documents. Did I reference them? Oh, I referenced the code, right? It didn't even tell me which code it uses. So let's hope that this is nice. And I'm going to do this. Update Pimoroni tutorial to actually work. So now we can just press run, right? No. Is it this button here? Jesus. So, I mean, it doesn't really know the size of it or something, but it does say hello Pimoroni. So that's pretty cool. Let's tell it to the display is really small and high, because this is not 135 horizontally. Is it? Is it? I should go back to my iPad to really explain what I just did. All the things that I did. Oh, I closed it, right? Pimoroni display. Pico display. That's what it was called. Right, like this is 135 and then this is 240. I guess it is, huh? I guess it is. 240 times 135, so the text is cut off. And really fun, but I can't really easily take images on my Linux. Can I? I'm not going to explore that now. But I would paste an image of the cut off text. So really encouraging. I'm going to git commit. All right. Cool. So let's git commit. I've got this changelog that it runs. I don't know how useful it is, but it's fun. I should delete it after each session, to be honest. And so now, and I'm continuing in this chat because I think all the stuff in the chat here is still pretty useful. I might, start from scratch with just a Pico reference. I'm not sure if it, in fact, even searched the code base to figure that out. Like, I'm not sure what it did there. But it didn't add the Git files, so that's often like a mistake. Because if I go to the labs, right? So I'm going to, I'm going to check in the typings. Why not? This is good. This is good. I assume this is all good. Robot add embedded Pico experiments. All right, cool. So going back to the iPad to explain what I just did. And just to explain for people who might not have been there at the beginning, like I'm not sure who is in the chat or if even anybody's in the chat right now. The way I think of LLM driven development is everything's about tokens. You have input tokens, you have tokens in the training corpus here, input tokens here. Let me actually create a new layer before I start making things even more horrible. So we have training corpus tokens, we have input tokens, and those get kind of combined when doing an LLM inference to create output tokens, right? And so in the input tokens, they do imply a certain structure and a certain meaning behind them, right? The training corpus obviously has a lot of meaning in the stuff that it was trained on. And so this kind of like structure, meaning, reasoning, whatever you want to call it, is kind of encoded in a training corpus. And when you do an inference, it uses that to transform, literally called a transformer, these input tokens into output tokens by rewriting them according to both the patterns in the input tokens and the patterns in the training corpus. And input tokens really have a stronger effect than stuff in the training corpus. And then you get these output tokens. And that's literally all there is to it, right? Like there's no chat, there's like no reasoning, there's nothing. There's just like input tokens and then output tokens. And the way I think about the input tokens is they're kind of queries to fetch patterns out of the training corpus to apply them to themselves, right? So they're kind of like, it's not a search query per se, it's a transformation query. And transformation could imply, oh, I should show the iPad, I'm an idiot. So to go back here, we have input tokens, we have a training corpus, and then we have output tokens. And these little yellow arrows that you see, they're like the relationships between tokens. And those can be like meeting, right? Like if you write function, blah, 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 this is like kind of a relationship of a function. So it doesn't really matter if the first word is called function or func or def. There's like a very similar relationship between these tokens. Basically, yeah, LLMs are transforming. I think of them as language transformers, literally. It is always in the back of my head. They're not like something that reasons per se. It's a big transformer of what I'm going to input. And basically every little token that I input is going to have an effect on the output. And to map that to what we're doing right now, what I did here is I had an set of input tokens into ChatGPT where I was like, make a tutorial to develop MicroPython, right? MicroPython on Linux with VS Code. And these are like a whole bunch of like input tokens that do imply certain relationships, right? Like tutorial is kind of, this is the topic of the tutorial. Like there's all these, they're not obviously not explicit, but they're why we understand these sentences and why we have grammar and like all of these things. It's like there's a lot encoded into language that's completely independent of how I think about a tutorial about develop MicroPython, right? It's like, but the way I think about it, which is inexpressible, I compress it into words. These words are related to words in a training corpus, but they're also related to how you learned language. And so they're a way, like they're just a shell. And this shell has structure that allows me to fetch, more words. What I'm trying to say here is that the way I think about it is really there's no meaning implied. It's like fetching words. And that's why LLM code has this like weird tendency. It looks great, but sometimes it makes absolutely zero sense. But it looks great because it has a meaningful structure. Like there's enough in a training corpus to have it be meaningful at first glance. But then the implied meaning and relationships behind it are wrong. And that's why it makes no sense. To the LLM, it looks perfectly okay, right? Because by the virtue of it generating it, it means it was okay for the LLM. It's just like this thing that is in our brain that is inexpressible, but that we try to express through words, maybe we can express it very correctly through words, but those words are not in the training corpus, or they got diluted in the training corpus. Like there's all kinds of things. So anyway, I had these input tokens, right? I put them into OpenAI ChatGPT as a query, and I enabled the search. So what ChatGPT did is like it created new output tokens, and those output tokens were a search query for their search engine. So at this point, we're in deterministic land with quotes around it, and it does a web search, right? Like it goes to the cloud, does a web search, fetches more tokens from different tutorials and different reference sites and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of like MicroPython related search results, but it could be like total garbage, right? Like it could be like forum posts, which it did, could be anything. So the first thing is like having a mental idea of this first transformation, right? Like which tokens in my query are going to create which tokens in the search query, which we sadly are not able to see. And then we have a further inference where now the search token plus my input tokens plus a system prompt, right? Like there's a system prompt that gets added here and then here. This will create more output tokens, which are now our tutorial. And this tutorial was pretty good. It was missing one thing, which I, by the way, need to add back. So this was the tutorial, right? And this I stored as a standard file, right? Store as file. And that's kind of what I mean by files are cached inference. Like really the file is a cached version of all of this. And now by referencing this file, I skip the LLM having to do the inference of what is in there, which not only is it expensive, but it can go wrong. And also it might generate like way more tokens than I need, right? Like all of this is a lot of tokens. Well, actually this is a lot of tokens. And furthermore, I can edit it by hand, right? It's like I'm a little human. I'm totally allowed to transform tokens as well, right? Except I'm much slower and I don't have this like full knowledge of the training corpus. However, I do have a brain and I can kind of actually know the meaning behind words. So this is what I did. This is how I was thinking about the tutorial, right? And then we had to do a second warp search, which is like, oh, Pico display, right? I was missing libraries, and then we did the whole thing again, and then we updated this here as well. This we did in Cursor. So again, like this is now cached in this document. And what that means is that I can just take this document, take it to a completely fresh context, which, right, like LLMs never know anything until you put it into their context window. So that also means that you can very easily experiment with your document by putting in a fresh context and then saying like, can you do this now? And if it's not able to do it, then it means your document should maybe be updated, right? So this is what I did so far. And I did a second transformation, which now you're going to start to see, hopefully, a pattern in my thinking. And I mean, to me, none of this sounds like rocket science, but also there is this very subtle things that I do think about tokens. I don't think about meaning per se. I think about tokens as like reified dead kind of skeletons of meaning, and I'm fetching more skeletons of meaning, and hopefully those kind of assemble to something that makes sense. So the second thing that I did is I cloned the Pico MicroPython or whatever it's called, Pymoroni repo. And then I added a little query of like, make a reference doc. And I kind of let the agent do it, right? Like I'm not really sure what the agent did here. This is going to be my agent symbol. It's like a little robot. Yoo-hoo. So the agent did some stuff. I'm not even sure if it actually looked at the source code, but I mean, it seemed to work. Then it puts all of this, right? Like the agent's going to fetch all kinds of context from the repo, and then puts it into the LLM, and out comes a reference doc, right? And then here again, it's just like a cached version of all this stuff it needs to do. And so you can do this caching, like, right? You're having conversation, you can cache it at that point. Either you save the whole conversation, which usually not that useful, but you just ask it like, oh, at the end, like, can create a tutorial about what we just did, right? And then you cache it. You put it into your ttemp folder. And the reason I put it into ttemp is that I'm not going to do cache invalidation on it, which means that if the underlying material changes, I'm going to be like, yeah, those documents I'm not going to update them. Documents that I do care about updating, and in this case, the tutorial and the reference, are definitely documents that I do want to keep and invalidate as we go on. Those I would move into just like a docs folder, right? But if today I'm refactoring things to make all the widgets blue, and I make a tutorial about how to make a widget blue to avoid having to have the LLM kind of reason about it every time, this how to make a widget blue, I don't care if in the 6 months it doesn't work anymore. So it's good to tell the cursor agent, like, please don't look at these documents except when I explicitly say so. I should add that to my cursor prompt. But this is how I created the reference, right? And then I guess that's where we are right now. I created, in some sense, the Python scripts that I created are also cached reasoning, right? So all of this is just like storing the LLM output and modifying it so that it's useful now and useful in the future. So let's get back to it, because we now updated this app, which should make it all a little bit nicer. So let's try this out. Run current file, and it made like a big rectangle to show this, but it like overlapped. So I'm just going to assume that this is going to do it. So how do I do run current file on Pycode? There's no shortcut for it. But so if we look at the result, we see that this time it used like a small bit font. I'm sorry that it doesn't focus on it. I guess this is not a macro camera. The font is really, really fucking small. But anyway, it worked. So everything cool. I committed it. So now I can kind of start working on this. So if I start a new thing and then I'm going to add my reference, right? Like I'm sure the agent might find it or not, but oh, I wanted to create the reference with thinking. Yeah, whatever. Add button press to each button change rectangle color. So I want to test my buttons as well and just like test the interactivity. So at this point, things should be kind of on rails, right? Hopefully the reference works. And this is a good way to test it. I mean, the agent's going to like start fetching additional things. Hopefully it will tell me when it fetches stuff. But if we did everything right at this point, it should really like kind of do things correctly. So if we run it, is it running? Yeah. And so I mean, this is not rocket science at this point, right? But the fact that it doesn't hallucinate an API for something that's like so obscure as a Pymoroni MicroPython library is all due to the reference document. Because you could see in the first one, it didn't know this symbol. did something really close. It called it like display Pymoroni Pico display, which maybe was a previous name. It didn't use create pen. It used like init, or I don't remember what. So the reference document, which I haven't even looked at, to be honest, really helps do it right. And you can see it's not like a super crazy reference. It's just like a couple of examples. This is actually not the format that I would need fully, that I would use fully usually. I would add a full reference and then for every example, add a little paragraph that explains it. So maybe in like update the Pico reference to have a little paragraph on each section explaining how the example works, because adding some explanation of the how things work behind the scene is going to be good fetching patterns for the training corpus, right? Because it's going to encode patterns that might not necessarily be fully obvious in the code, especially in embedded where we want to know how potentially like background tasks work, those things. So I'm sure I'll update the reference as we go and then look at Pymoroni. So I can't link folders anymore, huh? Look at the Pymoroni folder. I don't know if this works. No, it's not able to find it. So I wonder if there's like add workspace to the Pyromoni Pico workspace folder. It definitely worked. I noticed that you can't link directories in this new version. But okay, so that works. So it didn't use that actually for the reference, which is funny. So it was able to fetch that out of its training corpus of 3.5, which is, I guess they trained it last year. I looked at the C++ file, which is interesting. So I'm curious, maybe this will break it. Who knows? So you have to add files and folders. Oh, okay. Well, cool. Thank you. No, but it doesn't allow me to fetch the folder, right? Like I have Pymoroni Pico, and then, because usually previously I could ask it to like kind of focus on the directory. It's funny because it says folders, and then indeed here at the top, I do have full folders here, but just a few. So I'm not sure. All right, but anyway, so what is it doing here? The graphic, yeah, this is not what I wanted. Oh, this is good. Well, the event-based system adds something. So event-based, so that's nice. Yeah, I'm going to accept it. I don't think this is super useful. I don't want to spend the whole day updating this reference. But as you can tell, this reference is really the key to working with like unknown things. That's why when people say like, oh, it doesn't really work well with this language or this thing, it's like, create this document and see how far you get. And maybe it's annoying that you have to reference it always, or like you can put it into a cursor rule right in here. So actually, I've never really played with the new cursor rules, which is Pymoroni reference, and then add Pymoroni reference. Gosh, why is it updating this field? I'm going to do this in auto attach, and then here, look at, yeah, why is it doing that? Oh, it's putting the, oh my God, this is so frustrating. Like, what the fuck? It's putting the focus back here every 2 seconds. Oh my god. Oh, come on. All right, this is nonsense. So where did it put this? Cursor? All right, look at MicroPython Pyco reference.md. I wonder if you need to cursor rules. Yeah, I'm not sure if you... Oh, come on. Oh my god. All right. I managed to do it in time. Oh, this is horrible. So what does this look like? Okay, it looks like this. Good to know. Oh my god. That was annoying. So let's see if that works, right? It's like it really allows you to work with legacy code bases, with your own libraries, with your own languages, like all of that stuff. Yeah, they iterate really quickly, which I understand it. Like writing with AI, not testing, it's pretty good. That's why I was a little bit wary of updating because some of my workflow might just break, but I can just revert. But I think they should, right? I think they should they should iterate as fast as they can. I mean, still like not make completely broken betas, but I don't think this is a greatest interface. I don't like, yeah. I wish they told us a little bit more about what's going on. We'll see. They raised like 150 millions. That's kind of crazy valuation, $30 billion. Absolutely wild. Like, what are they going to do with that money if like they have 10x engineers? Like they don't need anything. 100x AI is just going to build a cluster or whatever. Anyway, I don't know. They kind of sold their soul in my point of view. So now that we have this reference, we can actually, this first prototype that it kind of created, we might want to update it. And so see, there's this timer thing. So that's going to be interesting. Like this might be something that we need to fetch from the MicroPython stuff, right? It's like, maybe this is a good point to be MicroPython timer API, class timer, control hardware timers. Is going to be interesting because this apparently resolves, right? Then I don't know why this doesn't kind of do it. Like, what is wrong here? Overload, no overloads, match the provided arguments. All right, cool. So we could potentially reference these things because actually they're pretty good documents, right? Idle is not defined. Yeah, whatever. So we could, before we move on, since this still hallucinates, we already have the Pymoroni display, but we're going to do the same now for create a nice reference document similar to, since we now have this guy, but focusing on MicroPython and its APIs, especially for the RP2040. Look at typings. Oh yeah, it doesn't do the folder. And machine PY, I, and all those stubs with docs to create it. By default, Cursor Intelligent compresses larger files. Whatever. I guess typing PY is like huge, right? Like that might not have been the best file to include. Oh, Jesus. This is, whatever. We're here. Let the GPUs burn. So here again, I just like cache cache stuff. Um, but obviously, it matches like a standard software development workflow, except you wouldn't write a third-party reference of that quality ever. Maybe you'd put like a couple of notes in a Google Doc or in a README or in a comment saying like, "Don't do this," for other developers, but usually you don't push it that far, right? But now you can. Like, what is it going to cost me? Like the time to make a coffee? And that's kind of like why I'm so convinced that this will just lead to really good software development. And if it doesn't, then it's like you really did put in like what the 5 minutes of time to generate this document. It's literally solved in 5 minutes, usually, especially with things like deep research, which would have created that one pretty well, I'm sure. Tomorrow I get new credits, so I'm gonna try that. And actually, you know what? Let's just revive my Perplexity. Actually, Perplexity Deep Research API. I know that they have an API offering now. I thought I did. Sonar Deep Research. All right, cool. So it literally just requires the model, and then this is just like chat completions. Is this compatible to OpenAI? I mean, can I get this into like a readable format? Oh, come on. Nope. Because, right, it's like a freaking fucking JavaScript thingy. Sonar Perplexity Open API. Open API specification 2 days ago. That looks cool. So the thing I wonder, is this compatible to the OpenAI completions API? It's Perplexity. All right. So let me try that. How can I do this? Try Perplexity. How do I get API keys? Quick start, visiting the API settings page, API setup payment. All right, let me do this on my Mac. All right, I'm almost there. I'm like setting up a profile for working with the Perplexity API, and then hopefully my command line tools work. Um, so we'll see that. And then the AI engine, the default, we're gonna make that supported models. So I'm just setting up my tooling. I'm just like setting up a like tool chain and all of that. Sorry, a profile with the API key and all of that stuff, and then we'll see if that works. So let's see if that works. Just had to like put up credits and all of that. I'm gonna do this Pinocchio profile Perplexity, and then let's see, invalid, looking for beginning of value, authorization required. Huh. Well, I'm not going to play debugging authorization on stream because not today. And anyway, that's not what I wanted to do. I set up payment, and I guess I'm going to pay my $20 for now. I'm sure there's like Perplexity offerings from like everywhere, but Cox Perplexity. Cox Wi-Fi Perplexity offering. Perplexity offering discount. I wish I could just like deep research Perplexity things. All right, this. What is this? All right. Xfinity, free Uber One. All right. Well, I guess not today, huh? All right. So because I want deep research to what do I even want to do? What did I want to do? Yes. All right. All right. All right. All right. I use monthly because I'm going to cancel it like every 2 days. So set your favorite model. Image generation. AI model. Oh, wait. Yeah. Well, whatever. Deep research. What did I want it to do? It created a MicroPython reference. And then I don't remember what we were going to do after that. Oh, well, whatever. All right, so now we can go to our actual prototype and then fix it, right? Fix it, and then we just use this, and we use this. So all right, and then write a spec tutorial readme for that prototype in 02 Claude prototype 1.md. And here the pattern is, I mean, I should have created the spec before. I was hoping for a React prototype when I did the prototype in Claude before. I got a MicroPython prototype. I have no idea what it does. I mean, it does stuff that sounds okay. So instead of having the spec up front, now I'm creating the spec of the code, which works fine. Usually it works actually really fine. It's very similar to what we did with the reference, right? Because obviously the patterns in this come from this previous pattern that I could have used to create the spec when I said, oh, create a prototype for a film development strip testing thing. As your application grows, of course, and you start introducing more and more patterns that might be confusing, creating a spec after the fact is kind of more fraught. But these days, man, it's just like amazing. You can just, so just to show you how amazing things are, I'm going to start a new cursor to show you how absolutely blasting this stuff is. It's legit scary. Because you can kind of reverse engineer shit. Like, no, this, oh my God, this is huge. I shouldn't have done that. Open folder, others, Pymoroni Pico. All right, so, right, like I opened Pymoroni Pico. I don't know how big this thing is. Let's go see. Others, CD Pymoroni Pico. So we get, it's like 100,000 lines of C++ plus headers, 20,000, some C, 35,000, and then some 35,000 lines of C++. And then if I do the token stats with my tool Pinocchio, which has like a ton of like these useful things, in total we have 4 million tokens in this code base, right? So we have 313,000 tokens of Python. I have no idea what INL is. We have like 3 million tokens of C++. Jesus Christ. So just a lot of shit, right? Definitely not something that fits into our context. But now with the agent mode, I can literally do something. What? And then just like cruise around. It's wild. And so explain everything in detail. The what query was the first time I tried it. It's not that great. I'm trying to show off. Like, isn't this wild? And this is grounded knowledge, right? Like, I'm sure at times there's stuff from the training corpus hallucinations that come in, but this is really like based on whatever the agent put into its context. And it's and then it's full Pico graphics explaining of the internals of the features and internals. And right, like if you have a really solid spec for something, you can usually like pretty much generate stuff out of it, but you can also generate really solid specs out of code. And that means that like you can clone the functionality of like these huge projects pretty quickly. And also just understand how they work, right? So me being a curious person, I will just go into things and start asking like, look, how does the Wi-Fi support work on something so small? And then you get these like super detailed responses with like, if I had asked for file links, I would have had like which files are in there. Like all of this stuff is kind of wild. And this is 3.5 still. I'm going to try with 3.7 now. And yeah, no, this is right. Like this is nuts. I really think this is completely nuts, and it like links to where it found it. I mean, obviously, this thing seems to have some pretty good documentation, which like makes these things significantly simpler. But this works on like garbage repos as well. So this was cool, right? Like I'm going to start a new chat, and I'm going to switch to 3.7 thinking, and now I'm going to make like I'm going to remove the README. Explain the internals of the Wi-Fi TCP stack in details. I don't even know if it has a TCP stack in this or if it just wraps something else, but we'll see. Right, and this is, as an engineer, this is something that would have cost me like quite a bit of time to learn. And even things like the TCP protocol, it's been like freaking 20 years since I knew the details, or like Wi-Fi, I don't really know Wi-Fi at all. But using these techniques, I can get a pretty solid understanding of the fundamentals pretty freaking quickly, right? How does Pico W Wi-Fi stack work, right? I'm going to do a deep research on here. I would never get to this level of like expertise that quickly. Like even if I just get 3 or 4 bullet points on how these things work, that might be enough for me to really work with this thing, right? Like maybe I need to know which chip it is. I mean, that's not too hard to find out, but like all of this expertise stuff, which I'm pretty sure I can trust. I'm not fully sure, but let me look this up. CS pin 7. Oh, they're not indicated on this board. But like all of these things are like kind of superb, right? And then what it allows me to do further is that like the best way to learn about something is just like work with it and try it out. Is like I can apply all these patterns that I was talking about earlier of like, okay, well, now make a couple of exercises and it can give me the stubs. It can like make the tutorial to get me started. It's just like to gain fundamental knowledge about something while skipping all the nonsense. Like I don't care about where the font is defined, and I don't care about CMake lists, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about a lot of things. I do care about the fact that it has a buffered IO, right? And so what does buffered IO mean? And like, how do I poll it in the main loop? And how does this work, right? Like, how does polling work when using this in MicroPython? How does MicroPython do the polling? Do I need to call it myself? Or I can ask it about like which access points does it do? How does Wi-Fi work in the first place? Because I do actually not really know that. And maybe it's the Wi-Fi mode that makes it not connect to my thing. Gaining that knowledge from, this is not even like searching tutorials online. This is from the actual source. So I think this being, the most effective way to work with AI right now. And, maybe agents will be able to do a really kick-ass job. We're all going to be like, yeah, first I'm going to generate a reference, and then I have like a little agent loop that verifies that the reference is actually working. And then I'm going to create these tutorials for different tasks. And right, like I can totally see an agent doing it. Currently, there's none. I really want to build one. And it could really be that this fundamental knowledge to build, say, and debug a Wi-Fi issue, a model can do it completely with its dead shell of language, is able to assemble all the necessary stuff to do this. But since we're humans and we're curious, and the more we know about something, the better we can work with it, right? Like the prompting my prompting efficiency, knowing these things when doing Wi-Fi, are going to be massively increased compared to someone who doesn't know that this is like polling based, right? Like maybe I'll start getting like some real-time audio issues and I'll be like, oh, maybe it's the Wi-Fi stack polling, and I'll be able to prompt like smaller Wi-Fi polling interval, and then boom, it's fixed. And if I don't know that it's polling based, then I can search forever. I don't, however, need to know how the polling's implemented in detail necessarily. But if I do, then I can know even more, and I could be like, oh, well, maybe I need this weird ass flag to make it work better because I've seen this like fly by. But the fact that it links stuff to the actual real implementation is bonkers to me. This is the quality of a really good blog post, I think. But not only is this like a really good blog post, but it's like it has this like insane thing of linking to all the source code, and I can like talk with the tutorial in a way. I can ask it to do things, right? Like it's just well, and it's like, oh, do I need to pull it in Python? And it's like, yeah, I do, right? And then here, I don't know what it does here actually. I'm not fully sure this is correct, but avail server, check for new avail data. Why does it link to this? Why does it not resolve this? I guess because I need. Yeah, I'm not sure how to resolve this, but who cares? So this is how you can just like take third-party legacy things and just like start hacking at them. And I actually am curious. Let's take a code base that I know is not that great. I mean, it's kind of okay, but it's really, really old. It's like shittily documented in German. It's a thing I wrote like 25 years ago. Actually, I should probably have it. Like I already tried to refactor it using LLMs, but this was a long time ago, a year and a half. And I got pretty far, but it was like a tedious process. So let's go back to main, master, how it was called at the time. And yeah, what did I fix 5 years ago? Holy shit. What did I do 5 years ago on this? This is wild. Anyway, actually, this is something we could ask Cursor, right? I don't know if it has access to tools and all, but Git tools. But so if I open this project, we're really getting off track, but whatever. If I open this and I'm like, what did I do 5 years ago? So yeah, it runs Git, right? Like this is this weird ass thing with just giving it the opportunity to run shell scripts, and then it's like kind of on its running on its own. I should turn on YOLO mode. I wonder if you can auto run YOLO mode. I wish you could say auto YOLO mode for this conversation. Yeah, I like. There's no way that this isn't going to massively increase the quality of the code bases out there, even if people, you know, kind of surf by on their knowledge. It's like I'm literally starting like, what did I do 5 years ago? I have no idea how MP3s work. This is an MP3 streamish thing, and so I add a separate bitrate table and I like frame sizes and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know why I did that, but this is wild, huh? It's like YOLO mode. And now I can be like, explain LSF in MP3s. in MP3s in detail, right? And then and write a ttemp 25.8 lsfmd. I give them number to remember in which order I created them. I have no idea what LSF is anymore, and I'm sure at the time I like spent quite a bit of time figuring this shit out. What year was that? Why did I do that? I don't remember why I did that. It's weird. Like, why would I have done something so obscure? Why would I have done that? I probably was making music and I wanted to split something or so. Man, YOLO mode is crazy. I wish it gave me like a 5-second countdown to like interrupt it. Can I look at this streaming while it's generating? Like, I really want to have that. And yeah, like now this is probably like grounded in search and grounded in a source code and all of that. So it's probably pretty good. And then we can apply all of these things if I'm curious about it again, right? And it's like, if you look at all the knowledge I've accumulated over these last 3 hours, I mean, I'm not going to remember too much of it, but I have the documents to do it. And it was like, oh, database internals and like MicroPython and PyMoroni and how the wireless works on the Pico, and then how MPEG LSF works, and also created 2 references for these libraries and created like 4 example demo applications. Like, it's just insane. So yeah, I must have added support for this shit, but it's so old. Why would I have done those changes? Like, why? What? Because I wrote this in like 2000 or so. Yeah. Yeah, probably there was like an MP3 type that I didn't know. And now that we have, because mobile didn't really exist at the time, right? Now it's probably much more common to have these things. So anyway, this a demo of how you can do all of this stuff, and let's see if our application actually works. And I asked it to create the spec, right? So if we look at the spec, it's timer application, help photographers track development and fixing times for film processing. And this is a great document for humans, right? Like, I didn't just create it for the sake of it. It's like, well, if this app works, then that's exactly the document that I want for it. So flash it, copy the script to your Pico as main PY. The display shows different information, experiment number, current stage, select chemicals, timer display, cycle through developers, cycle through fixers. Yeah, this is funny because it fills it in with actual value as I want to expand this to do HTTP over Wi-Fi, but I'm going to take a break for sure. The results are stored in a text file. So see, I didn't even know that there was like text files. So this is great. And you can customize all of these things. Like gives you all of these crazy things. And then these, I usually tend to just delete them because I know what I'm going to do, but maybe there's good ideas, right? The problem with these things is if you put them in there and put them in the context, especially with Claude Sonnet 3.7, it'll be like, sure, I'll implement all of them. And then I'll just like go on a rampage and just like destroy your code base because it tries to do too much at once. Then I delete this because I don't want anybody to contribute except the AI. Right. And so this is fun. Why not? MIT license, I really don't know what to do with that because I don't know what the license of this should be. I didn't write a single line of it. Yeah, credits. That's great. I love that. All right. So, well, maybe it doesn't work, right? Like maybe I'm just spouting nonsense, but this all seems pretty good. Um, and I mean, I guess we should try it, huh? Wow. It's kind of nuts. So it has the same problem as before. Is like it didn't know that the display's so small, so it like used this big font that like goes over. I really wish I could paste a screenshot of this. And so I'm going to prompt it to the display is 240 times 135. So things are going over. Make it more vertical. And so now if you think about what is language that humans would like to have when using this, for example, right? Like I don't know what the buttons are for. I don't think there's enough. Oh, actually it did. So, I mean, it already did. It describes which buttons to use um, to do what. But I could ask it like, oh, can you make me like a little cheat sheet to print out that I could just like put in there? See, so this is Sonnet 3.7. And I'm like, do you really need to do that? Like, this is worse. I mean, maybe it's not worse because it's embedded. So having a ton of strings in there is maybe not the worst idea. And it could be that it picked up on that from like some of the reference things where it says like, oh, don't use strings all that often. It's like, this is the kind of stuff where you have to be really careful with Sonnet 3.7. I've often run into it just like completely destroying all of this, and it looks like I have YOLO mode turned on. So even more dangerous. I love it. I didn't even accept the files and it just like committed them already. It's great stuff. How do I turn off YOLO mode? Features, chat, enable YOLO mode. Description of which commands should be this. All right. Flash again. All right, so now it uses like a fucking small ass font. Which, you know, at this point, I might take a walk, think about the actual interface that I want to have. But also, I was talking about making many prototypes because we can quickly generate prototypes, right? So if I go back to the Claude conversation where I got this thing from in the first place, so if I go to my Claude conversations and then I go to like, is this even in here? Film development timer prototype. Make a React prototype. We have a 240 times 135 display vertical. So implement a more multi-paged UI. We are using Picographics ultimately, but stick to React for the prototype. Because I want to just play with many prototypes, I don't want to like flash and debug some Python all the time, right? Like this thing doesn't have the 2 reference documents, and I'll show how we can leverage those documents like later on. But because it's pretty good at doing like pretty good React UX, I really like experimenting with stuff in here. And I mean, I see what we get. Well, we get to, and then I really need to take a break. That's funny. Now, this is pretty good, huh? Oh, I like that. Write a detailed spec for the app. Detail every screen. And then I will also take screenshots, which is always pretty fun. Except that the control buttons are kind of like, it doesn't show the full canvas, so I might fix that, right? In the React prototype, the full screen is not shown fully. Man, Sonnet just like yaps, like 3.7 just like yaps on and on and on and on and on. It's mildly annoying because they'll start just doing like all kinds of crazy suggestions where I'm like, I don't care. However, it's really good that it's now able to edit files. What I don't know is like, what is this deletion for? What is this deletion about? Do they output like deletion tokens? Like, do they, like, don't they have like a replace thing? I mean, I don't know what they're doing, so it just seems weird that it's streaming deletes. I don't think this is working. Man, why is it deleting stuff? No. Like, I want to have like nice screenshots. That's why I want to have it like fixed, and then I want to open it on its own. And then I just want to see this. Full screen mode. All right, cool. So this flex one, this width, this is wrong. Oops. Height, width. All right, there we go. All right, so these I'm gonna take as screenshots. I really wish this paste image would work. Let me see if I find like another paste image. Oh, maybe it was just like, so I'm going to go in there, right? I'm going to go in there, like whatever. I'm going to go in my ttemp folder, and I'm going to do a prototype take 2 spec, and I'm going to paste these images, paste image. There is no image in the clipboard. Paste image. Oh, dope. Ha. All right, great. So now I'm going to take screenshots of this and the timer. Well, actually, I should just do the screenshots of, yeah, whatever. Paste image. All right, timer screen. And this is the main screen. And then I'm going to paste this spec here. And then I'm curious to see how much 3.7 kind of added to this nonsense. So, all right. So, right, like this kind of stuff already. Top header, experiment number, on line below, prototype head on the right, but too cramped. And then this as well. State management. Does it mention the size of the screen? Yeah, it does. Track time, developing, all of that, all of that, all of that, all of that. So what I'm going to do now is I already have an app that works pretty well, right? Like I have this prototype here. It's great. And it does influence the spec because it had it in its context before. But still, I'm going to use this as a reference, as input tokens. I'm going to use the prototype, right? Take two. And then I'm going to say, based on the first prototype and the new spec and 225 PNG, can I reference that? No, I can't reference screenshots. I'm just going to paste them in then. And the screenshots create 05 Claude prototype 2. Look at 02 reference and 03 reference. All right, so those I kind of want to attach every time just to avoid it going all right. And here I'm using 3.7 because I wanted to write like a lot of code. Oh, I didn't look in the spec, all the nonsense that I put down on here. Future enhancement. Custom note fields, data export via graph visualization, multiple users profiles, customizable time presets. Those are all cool. And like the speed at which I can build those, because I've been talking for like 3 hours, right? Like I haven't been building. If I had been building, I would probably have gotten here in like 30 minutes because I'm so used to this workflow, right? Create the reference, create a tutorial to install, create a reference, create other references if I need to, create prototypes in Claude, and then implement them. So make a completely different prototype could be another idea. Here it already has like a lot of stuff in the context, so I might not get something completely different, but I could just start a new Claude and go in here and say React prototype for the vertical 240, 135 display of the Pico display. Make. And right, like it fixed the linter errors, which is already pretty good. And then it had like all these previously built things that will help it. And so if I run this one, there's a decent chance I think that it just works, but probably the layout's going to be like a little bit weird. Yeah. So the layout is not properly centered in all of that. So, hey, how's it going, Zach? I'm like building this like film development timer testing app, and the only thing that it has trouble with usually is like doesn't really know the display kind of stuff. So I'm gonna say again, the display is 240 times 135, so the whole rendering has to be fairly narrow. And in fact, maybe I should just do it horizontally. But let's see. And this like 240 times 135 is something I would definitely put in a cursor roll because we get it like every time. and this is kind of a UX question. Like this is something I would do on paper, draw a little bit, walk around, think about it, like just get a clear idea. And maybe these things like make it clearer. But this one is like significantly worse, right? So simulate the buttons. So I think the previous one, the simulation, it was able to do it because it had already written the Python. So here, yeah, this is nice. I like this way better, actually. I mean, it's kind of similar, but yeah, this is nice. I like the second one much better, right? So I could just redo the cycle, which is, oh, well, let's make a new spec and then, just create one more. So I'm going to do just that, create a similar spec now. And in this case, I might actually keep this in the history just because this like kind of UI guidelines is definitely a document I would like to have. And maybe at this point, if this looks good, right, like I might ask it like, oh, create a document to explain the UI guidelines. And it didn't get it. Like it still looks kind of the same. So this is where I would intervene manually. Right, like I'm not sure if yeah, this kind of stuff, I don't know. It just like wasn't able to do it. So maybe so actually render in portrait mode. That might be another, no, in landscape mode. So that might be another thing. I'm not reverting to the original prototype. I'm reverting to the thing to already fix it because I don't know. I'm getting tired as well. So might be a good moment to stop at this point. Because it's been what? It's been 3 hours and 20 minutes. Wow. All right, yeah, I think a document to explain the UI concepts and the UI style that we chose gonna be really, really useful so that I can in the future iterate on like MicroPython apps much faster, right? Again, it's like this is something I need to think about because it's design ultimately, and then I need to think about how do I encode the design into tokens that will be very effective to get the LLM to do the right stuff. And that could be a library, right? If it has a library, it says like display four buttons, which is like a core component of our UI, then it just like has no opportunity to hallucinate some weird stuff. Because the graphical reasoning like has no way of really knowing what the screen looks like. If I put screenshots back in, it will kind of maybe understand better. I've never really done that workflow too much. But also, doing it document based is just like a very useful workflow because it's just good human practice as well. So I don't know what it thinks about landscape mode, to be honest. I mean, it's nice. Now the UI looks nice when I set landscape mode, which is weird because it's still in portrait mode. But hey, it's a fucking small font, so I'll just have to think about how I deal with this like tiny display and make it show what I want. I think I'll just have it like be big fonts and on multiple screens is probably what I want. And then I'll draw some stuff on paper and then I'll just put it into Claude and generate a React prototype, take screenshots, make a spec, then port it over. And we can see now that I can one-shot prototypes, right? Like I can one-shot prototypes, and I'll show you. If I go in here and I remove this, I just link the two references that I made, and then I say create an app to play something like Duck Hunt. Then, I mean, hopefully I'm not like promising too much here. But we'll see. All right. And I'm not going to fix this if this doesn't work. So I know that Duck Hunt, it has in its training corpus, most certainly, quite a bit. And I know that our documents were working, and then self-direction, random choice. Why does this return none? Well, I mean, this doesn't seem to be an issue, to be honest. I'm not sure why this is none. Oh, wait, what is it doing? Is it trying to fix it? So this is dangerous with 3.7 because it starts doing like, what is it doing? It's starting to put ellipses in there and all of that kind of stuff. So, and they removed the restore to previous versions that work. So that's kind of, I missed that. You could restore to like intermediate files. So let me see if I can fix this thing and like kind of force it to be a float. So how can I do this? Force type of self-direction to be float. Oh, it's not int. All right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to shoot on this thing, and it's like obviously it's not super great, but it runs, it does. I can move this like thing around, and I'm sure I don't know what the shooting button is supposed to be, but you know, I could generate a documentation for this or so. But it was more to show, even though this is a really obscure kind of library, it's kind of an obscure language that looks like Python but isn't really, and has like memory management things and all of that. Now that I've generated two reference documentation, it's just like I can just like generate apps at the speed of sound, right? So there we go. That was it for today.